Hello and welcome to part 2 of 2, making Copenhagen a verb. Hope you're having a good day and hope you're enjoying the videos. So, here is the battle, and I'm going to do the normal thing of disappear for a second while I explain this. So, see you in a second. So, the Danish forces, as I've said, amounted to roughly 10,000 troops, half regular, half militia, and they managed to man most of the positions quite well and quite strongly. They had very good defenses built, including a major star fort constructed technically on the northern end to an extent of the city. Their ships were mostly arraigned inside their harbour and theoretically were protected in there, but as we know, weren't. The 26th of August, the General Wellesley, in charge of reserve, is attached with his reserve and 2 light brigades of British artillery, as well as another roughly, let's put it this way, he's dispatched with a very heavy, artillery-heavy brigade formation, enhanced brigade formation, to disperse the force which had been sent to relieve the beleaguered city. And there is another little battle there. And frankly, Wellesley kicks Tushy, which is not nice to say, but it's what he does. And it's what he does well. The British then issue some demands, which basically is hand over the fleet and we won't destroy your city. And then they don't. And so between the 2nd and 5th of September 1807, they bombard the city for pretty much 4 days straight. Luckily, the British had allowed the civilian population to flee from the city, so there weren't many of them around. But there was a lot of other things used, including a lot of concrete rockets, which had a nasty habit of setting wooden buildings on fire. They could also set wooden ships on fire, and there were some issues with some sails, but they mostly managed quite well. But one interesting thing is you're listening, and it's like the first battle in that you're going, okay, so you're attacking a prepared defensive position. You should be taking heavy casualties here. You're not. How are you not taking casualties? And they're really not. In terms of, this is a major defended point. Look at the fortifications around it. Yes, you've only got 10,000 troops to defend all those fortifications, but still, and those half of them are militia, but they're Danish militia, which means they're usually quite well trained, quite well organized. There are some battles you look at and you go, I am not one who goes for British exceptionalism. I think Britain has a lot of luck occasionally, and sometimes pulls things off it really shouldn't through that luck. Occasionally, also, there are other structural things which the British has built into their system and have adapted into the British system and British sort of culture, which give them a sort of advantage which is not really seen until it happens. But the battles of Copenhagen, if you ever want any proof of British exceptionalism, are really the battles you should be looking at. Because on neither occasion should the British actually achieve anything like what they achieve. And yet they do. And the interesting thing again here is the Danish commander, who I forgot to mention in the last video because honestly he is is a non-entity, but in so many respects. And that sounds really cruel to say, but his requirements for Heinrich Ernest Payman were he is a Danish soldier, general, and he was required to hold Copenhagen, and if that failed, to burn the fleet so that the British can't take it like they did last time. He does neither. Now, honestly, I can accept him not burning the British fleet because he probably thought that's his ace in the hole to save the place if he needs to. If he has to pick between handing over the fleet or having Copenhagen burnt to the ground, he wants to keep the fleet alive so he can hand it over. I can accept that one. And I can accept that the amount of firepower brought to face him was truly massive and truly monumental for the time. But saying all that, he's got all these defenses. He's got a very strong defense base. There is no way they can really close off water. There is no way they can. In many ways, yes, there's a fleet there, but there's a fleet inside. The Royal Navy would have to be split up, and surely they could to really do an effective naval blockade. There are so many options for what he could have done, and he didn't do any of them. I don't know. I honestly don't know. If you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, though, that's what they were. The Danish were stuck between the British and the French. And this is what happens. There are lovely paintings of the fires, of the problems created in Copenhagen afterwards, the damage done. What most people don't understand is that most of the firefighting force were actually civilians. Their firefighting measures, the measures that were actually in place, which were quite advanced in Copenhagen at the time compared to some of the other cities I've looked at over the years of my study. The trouble is, without the civilians around to run them, they really don't have them, and fire breaks out very easily and does a tremendous amount of damage. So Copenhagen is kind of like the White House and Washington. The British are very useful. We turn up, we trash a place, you get to renew it. It's kind of what some people compare the Blitz to, but unfortunately, after the Blitz, the British seem to have lost their aesthetic judgment in terms of reconstruction, which is why we ended up with a load of concrete, ugly monoliths. Whereas after we did it to people, it ended up looking, and people ended up improving it and making it look good and beautiful. And let's consider the captured ships. Yeah, and please note, something happened to them. So, the captured ships. Well, some of them are rated down because the British prefer to modify them to suit their own needs. So, Christian the Seventh is an 80-gun vessel because, frankly, they don't like the 84. So it becomes a solidly second-rate vessel. But again, you can understand why Gambia was going, I don't need to take first rates with me. They have nothing first rate. I will take a fleet of third rates. I can't see much advantage for Denmark from having 76 guns to having 74 against the 74. And so, obviously, the Royal Navy can't because they take it down to 74. Interesting enough, again, the Royal Navy architects do have fun. The Ave Prince Frederick becomes heir apparent Frederick and is upgraded to 74 guns. So that must have been some fun naval architecture going on. It's always far easier to take guns off a ship than it is to add guns onto them. Causes all sorts of things fun for waiting. The British were quite happy to burn ships on the stocks, burn ships at the beginning. Gunboats were taken, but many of them actually sank on the way. Some were really floated by the Danish and the Norwegians, but let's be honest, gunboats with 2 guns weren't really what the Royal Navy was worrying about. Frigates were particularly useful. The Royal Navy was always short of frigates. And frankly, the captured ships of the line don't get used much. Not many of them actually ever get they get brought into the Royal Navy, but not many of them actually ever get deployed operationally. They're sort of laid up there as, if we need them, we've got them. If this war carries on, if we end up having a massive war, and it goes on far longer, and we need them because we start losing ships, we have them. But they don't need them. So a few of them get used, but not many. But the frigates, they're another thing. Lots of the frigates get used. The Royal Navy is always perennially short of frigates. Frigates are the eyes of the fleet. They're the escorts for convoys. They are the sloop present ships in everything at the time. It's basically, you have your war fleet and you have your other duties fleet. So you have your battle fleet to fight your battles, and then you have your frigates. And the Royal Navy is always short of frigates. Anyone would think, and this is just, of course, diving in the current times, we're now currently talking, people going, yes, the Chinese fleet is now the largest fleet in the world in terms of numbers of ships, I presume, or tonnage maybe. But they forget how much that tonnage is made up of very small vessels. Very, very small vessels. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually quite an intelligent idea if you think about it, if you're thinking from a Chinese perspective. And it's the same from the British perspective in the Age of Sail with frigates. You want as many frigates as you can. A, they're where you train your officers before you put them in charge of a great big ship of the line. And B, they're a lot cheaper to mobilize than a ship of the line. And C, they're all you need for many, many roles. And scouting and all these things, you need frigates. Gunboats, not so much. And brigs are always nice as well. Brigs they like as well. They're used. So, let's get into the summary, and this is going to be fun. Was it legal? Oh, was it legal? Yes. Strikingly enough, it was legal. The French and the Danish were colluding. They were discussing about the Danish joining the Continental system, and the Danish were leaning that way because it makes strategic sense. Okay, it's not bad guys, good guys, anything like that. It's quite simple. We have a choice. Britain's unlikely to invade us and try and conquer us and make us permanently part of Britain, whereas France is likely to invade us, conquer us, and make us part of the French Empire. So it makes sense to do that. But the consequence of doing that is you are going to piss off the British, because the British do not like your fleet being quite so strong next to there. So, other consequence for the Danish is they can't get rid of their fleet, because their fleet is one of the main advantages that gives them something to bargain with joining the Continental system. here is where a sneaking little argument comes in, that actually for the Danish, the best possible outcome was to join the Continental system, because they were outraged after being attacked, but have had the British take out their fleet, so that the British don't end up getting invaded by Britain, because there's no need for Britain to invade Denmark, because they no longer have a fleet, so they don't matter. It's a nice way of keeping out of the war, almost. Yes, we've joined the Continental system. We will enforce this most vigorously. But, we've got no fleet because the British have destroyed it. So, France don't need to invade us because we're part of your Continental system. We are behaving ourselves and following the rules. And Britain doesn't need to invade us because we haven't got a fleet anymore because they destroyed it. But that's probably me being very cynical to think that that's the case. What was the purpose of the strike? Well, I don't think it was to stop the Danish joining the Continental system, because no one is stupid enough to think that actually attacking someone is going to stop them joining the alliance, which will theoretically protect them from being attacked by that. So the real criteria is to stop the Danish fleet being a problem and keep the sea lanes open. And it does that. It does that very well. So why does Copenhagening become a verb? Because it happens twice, and that's the thing. When you're talking about the Second Battle of Copenhagen, when you're talking about the First Battle of Copenhagen, when you're talking about all the operations that have taken place in that region, the Royal Navy have historically done quite a lot of very aggressive action. Which is why, when sitting down, you have to sort of wonder why Copenhagen was left like it was. Yes, you have taken the vast majority of your army down to your border with the ever-expanding French Empire to protect yourself from getting a preemptive strike by the French. But again, and this sounds so egotistical to say, why have you left your fleet so unsecured? You have spent all this money rebuilding your fleet. You have spent all this money on your fleet. Preparing it, creating it. It's critical you do this. You allow this to happen. You don't secure it properly. You don't think. It's one of the things is, why wasn't it moved? The British are going to come. We're having these negotiations. The British are going to find out. Move my fleet to either a more secure anchorage than Copenhagen obviously is, make Copenhagen more secure than it is, or actually just put the fleet at sea. So that they go sail around in the Baltic for a bit. Well away from the British. All these are options. They don't do them. And it does cause a nice little war with Russia. But again, that doesn't really bother the British too much. That's one of the interesting things with us all. This, it doesn't. There are consequences, but they don't worry the British too much. And there seems to be another interesting scenario in that the trade between Denmark and the UK seems to continue. There still seems to be trade going on after this, and even before and during this. Now, you can say the British handled it quite well because they let the civilians out. They made sure the civilians were evacuated from Copenhagen, as many as could go. which is a fairly decent thing for the Brits to do and fairly sensible from a political perspective. So again, you sit there and you look at this, the half-hearted feint which Wellesley puts down quite hard, but without too much trouble again, because that's a relief force and it's defeated by a brigade, an enhanced brigade, but a brigade, a well-handled enhanced brigade, but still a brigade. It shows you how strong it is and how much effort is actually putting into relieving your capital city. You've got the fact that the general doesn't burn the ships. It's all... Whilst I would never think that it was colluded in advance or anything like that, because I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and honestly, that doesn't strike me as realistic. It does seem to me like a lot of people on the Danish side were thinking practically about what the reality of being caught between France and Britain would be, and this was how to handle it. And the British were thinking that they didn't want another war they didn't want a war up north in the Baltic, because if there'd been actually an active war where they had actively done very nasty things to the Danish, that would have been a problem. So, the Second Battle of Copenhagen shouldn't have happened because, frankly, the Danish should have learnt from the first. But as they didn't, and the second happens, you end up with this scenario. And a lot of paintings. A lot of paintings. I hope you join me later. It's going to be fun discussing this one. As I said, definitely not a conspiracy theorist and definitely not thinking it was all some sort of conspiracy. But you have to sit there and look and go, there is a lot of horror, a lot of destruction done to Copenhagen, but there aren't a lot of people killed. Things can be rebuilt. People can't. And the Danish have a very large army sitting down in their south to ward off the French, but, well, they take their time agreeing to join the Continental system, whereas you think they quickly agreed to the Continental system and then marched their army up, probably with French reinforcements, up to fight the British and relieve Copenhagen. If you're really committed to cause, that's what you would do, wouldn't you? We can talk about this in live. I know. Where else can you find me? Twitter, Patreon, and Global Maritime History. All a lot of fun. Recording bilge pumps tomorrow with Andrew Lambert. That's Professor Andrew Lambert of King's College, on my old PhD supervisor. Going to be talking about leadership. It's going to be a lot of fun. Anyway, take care and hopefully see you later. Hope you enjoyed this and hope it made you think.